Welcome back to another episode, you guys. Really excited to have Casey Schroeder here with me today. And one thing I going to kind of do something a little different today before I introduce Casey is one of the questions I get from a lot of people is how do you find your guests for your podcast? And so that's why I wanted to introduce Casey with this is because it goes a couple different ways. A lot of times it's referrals or it's people who I know who have really cool inspirational stories that I think the audience would like to hear. But with Casey, it was funny because I'd met Casey a few months ago at the gym, and I went up to him and I said, "Hey, look, I said I'm looking for a former pro athlete turned entrepreneur," and he's like, "That's me." So I said, "Some of my job is stalking people." So that was the other part of it is I have to be good at stalking people. So, anyways, Casey, thanks for joining me today. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So Casey is, like I said, a former pro baseball player, which we'll get into, turned entrepreneur. Really, really cool guy. Really cool, inspirational stories to share with us today. Can't wait to dig into some of that. So, Casey, before we get into like sort of where you are today, I kind of wanted to go back and I'm kind of a stat junkie, and being a fellow entrepreneur, you might know these things, but you might not.
All right.
And uh, I had to dig this up because I found this very interesting about your story. So first of all, for a high school player to get drafted into Major League Baseball is a 0.1% chance. Okay. And for a athlete to get drafted out of college is 0.4%. All right. Stay with me. Last one. 50% of all small businesses, as I know, fail within 5 years. And I don't say that as I've been down that road, thank God. But you get to know the stats as you try different things over the years. So, Casey, it kind of leads me into my, I guess, first question for you is: did you ever think about this path that you're on? Like the statistics are so low and so rare, and you're in such an elite club. With first of all, we can talk about high school and college and your pro baseball career, but then jumping into being an entrepreneur now for successful business now for I think going on 7 years. So have you ever thought about that? Like, wow, I kind of picked a path that's unconventional.
Yeah. I mean, I don't do a very good job of, stepping back a lot and kind of, soaking in the moment. It's one thing I've always, I don't know if to say struggle with, but just something, I never done. I've always been go, go, go and, very goal oriented. And there's always, a mark that I'm trying to hit. So I don't really take the time to, really see where I'm at a lot of times. But, I have in the last couple of years more. I've tried to be better at doing that. I think I blame a lot of that on my dad and, growing up and kind of how he was. It was always, hey, you want to be the best. Here's what you got to do. So I think, both, in my former athletic life and now in my business life, I still kind of operate under that, that same mentality to where, I'm always looking ahead. But, especially with this new store opening, which I'm sure we'll get into down in Grandview, that one, meant kind of a little extra to me. So I really tried to soak it in, last week when we opened and did a good job of that.
Mm, absolutely. I definitely want to get into to clean eats and some of the things you're building currently in your career. But going back to baseball, kind of where your path kind of started as your career and as your journey. Um, what age did you know, Casey, that you had something special? Did that your talent was at a level that was starting to get the attention of folks, maybe at the major leagues or even college. Was it when you were a kid? Was it more towards high school where things started to click? Were you always kind of gifted when it came to baseball?
Yeah. I mean, I always played up, even as a super young kid. I think, travel ball was like 12U. And I think I started playing that when I was 8 or 9, playing up. And then, probably when I realized, hey, there might be something here. It's a funny story. My American Legion kind of was what the baseball was in the summer where I grew up. And I remember, typically that's, juniors and seniors are mainly the players on that team. And I remember my dad just dropped me off at the tryouts in 8th grade and said, good luck. Don't come home unless you make the team, something like that. And I'm just, this little 14-year-old kid, 13 or 14 years old, pulling up with my bag, and there's guys with beards and things like that. And they're like, what is this kid doing here? Well, I ended up making the team, and saw routine action throughout the year. And that's, hey, I can compete with the guys ahead of me. And playing travel ball growing up, doing the tournaments over the summer. I was always pretty good, and we thought, hey, there might be something here. We didn't know exactly what would eventually become of that, but I kind of always knew that baseball was my sport, and I had an opportunity to play at the next level, and that was always the goal.
So take me back, Casey. Did you know coming out of high school, were you getting looks from Major League? Were you draft? When did you get like your first draft
Yeah. So I mean,
offer?
it was really I got caught a lot of steam my junior year.
Okay.
That's when I really started getting looks. I committed to Tennessee actually in eighth grade.
Wow.
Funny story with that was, I think it was just my dad and his friends, boys trip every year. They would go down to Knoxville, I think starting in fifth or sixth grade, and him and his friends, and then my buddies would go down, to the camp. And I performed really well down there, and they kept inviting me back. And eventually was fortunate to, get an offer from them, my eighth grade year, which was kind of wild. And, me having been there so much, so often, and being on campus, I love the university, and I jumped at that opportunity. But then, in high school, I played for a couple of scout teams. One of them in the fall was the Cardinals scout team, where the area scout in Ohio was kind of the coach of that team. So they had me on their radar. And then after my senior year during the summer, there's always teams always host workouts. So I got invited to a handful of those. I went up to a workout with the Tigers in Detroit. I went to one in St. Louis with the Cardinals, and performed really well at both of those. Ended up getting picked by the Cardinals. After my senior year of high school, I ended up electing to go to college, and I ended up at the University of Kentucky, where I was there for a year. So that's kind of how I, transitioned into the college world. Um, Obviously bounced around a little bit, ended up at Coastal Carolina for, my final season, but was fortunate to be drafted three times, which, is kind of unusual. And, I think my dad was ready to throw me out, after the second time I didn't sign, but I always thought I could do a little bit better, and could, get better at my craft, and it ended up all working out.
Well, I got to think that has something to do with, leading into business and then entrepreneurship is you're kind of just, we talk about this a lot on this podcast, is trusting that intuition, right? Kind of that whisper you had, and rightly so. If, I'm a dad too, and, your son's like, nope, turning that one down. Nope, turning that one down. But did you just know, like, this doesn't feel right? I think I can work and be a little better. And cause I feel like that's a lot of maturity at such a young age to not just take, the carrot that's dangling in
Yeah.
front of you.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I got drafted in high school, I got drafted as a catcher, but I played mostly infield. So, I was very raw, and I thought that I needed to continue to develop. And my mom, bless her, was very pro education, wanting me to go to school, and she was worried about my life after baseball, and wanted to make sure I got a college degree. So, you know, I think we set a very high price tag out of high school, to where, hey, if it hits this dollar amount, hey, we'll go college. But if we don't get that, we're going to go to school. So that was kind of the decision that we made as a family. And it ended up, everything happens for a reason. I'm a firm believer in that, and where I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't chosen that path.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I kind of like the kind of the give and take of mom coming in, and it totally it's mom. It always makes sense when she says something, right?
She's the boss.
Of course, of course. So then, for the listeners that don't know, Casey runs, operates several restaurants here in the Columbus area. When did it? And it's called Clean Eats. So when did Clean Eats come into play? Was that something? Were you always interested in becoming an entrepreneur? Like maybe someday when my baseball career is over, how did you even find out about Clean Eats, and kind of take us through the journey through how you got here with
Yeah.
that?
So, I mean, if you would have asked me 10 years ago, or, when I was younger, hey, you're going to own a restaurant. I would, I would have laughed at you. I would have never, never thought that. Throughout my athletic career, I've always had a passion for health and fitness. My favorite part of the year was training in the off season, being in the weight room, training hard. I've always had a love for that. And, I never really, I've always been competitive, growing up and very goal oriented, but I didn't really think I'd be in business for myself, when I was younger. It all just kind of, happened. And actually, I mean, I think it was in a way, kind of saved me, as a person, because a lot of athletes, when they get done playing ball, they really struggle with, what do I do now? They have a real identity crisis because, their whole life they were the ball player. That's what they did. It's, sun up to sundown, to where clean eats kind of gave me no choice but or I didn't have the opportunity to think about that. I just got thrown into the fire, and it was, hey, you got to figure this out. So in a lot of ways, I'm grateful that I did make that transition, right away. And I found out about clean eats actually when I was training in the off season. The first franchise location opened in the same town that I went to college in Myrtle Beach, and my strength coach actually recommended that I go there just as a customer, fit my goals as an athlete, and I just became a regular at the cafe. And me being in there all the time, I met the owner of that location, and he was very nice, very transparent with the brand and how it performed. And, I thought, hey man, there might be something to this. Fits kind of where my, overall, my personal values and, my interests. And, that's when I decided, hey, when I get done playing ball, I'm going to take a serious look at doing this.
Okay. And kind of take the listeners through what is Clean Eats? What's the premise behind the brand?
Yeah.
What's it all about?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're kind of, we try to bridge the gap, with fast food, but healthy, and fitting into a healthy lifestyle. There's a lot of different aspects to our business. We have, a normal cafe, just like any other place. You can come in and eat fast casual, you're in and out in 10, 15 minutes. Um, we also have a meal plan aspect to our business, to where we come out with a new menu every week that our customers can choose from. There's never any subscriptions or contracts or anything like that, but essentially we do all the cooking for you. So you can order each week from a menu, a la carte, and we prepare all your food and you pick it up. Our goal is to do nice balanced dishes, 500 or 600 calories or less. In store, we also have a plethora of frozen options as well that you can just grab and go on the run. So, we really try to give people a affordable, healthy, and convenient option. And we're trying to bridge that gap between affordability and health and convenience all at the same time.
Okay, so sort of like meal planning. So you set the menu for the week, and someone can come in there on a Monday and kind of just take care of the week, not have to worry
Yeah,
about.
yeah. And a lot of it is we're trying to reach out to people that may not know what they're doing. They have a goal in mind, whether it be they want to lose some weight, whether they're diabetic and their sugar's out of control, or they just want to make a positive lifestyle change. We try to be that resource for people, to where, hey, they can come to us, we can kind of push them in the right direction, to get them started.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, so I know you just opened a new location. Was it over the weekend? This past weekend?
Last Friday.
Okay, and that's number 4, number 3, and you have 4 coming.
Number 3, and then we
Yeah.
got number 4 coming next month, in Grove City.
Wow. Casey, I want to kind of back up on what you said about a lot of athletes coming out of pro sports, and that's their identity, and they come out. And I know Shaq talks about this a lot, which is beautiful to see
Yeah.
the transparency of it. But a lot of them are just lost, right? Like, this was my identity. I don't know what I'm doing. You had this vision. You had this, this opportunity to lean in and hear about something you had a passion for. But what were some of the things you took with you? Of, gosh, you look at, you were 6, 7, 8 years old and starting to, find the success in baseball all the way up through into your 20s. What did you learn from those years that you could kind of transition over into, okay, I can take the lessons I learned into being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, one is, from a leadership style, I try to lead by example. I always tried to do that when I played ball. I'm not necessarily the most vocal person, but but I try to do things, the right way to show that, hey, the owner of the company is willing to do these things, just to get more buy-in. So, that's one thing that I think that I brought with me from, my athletic career to now business life. The other thing is just, I think work ethic. I tell a lot of people, hey, I'm not the smartest guy in the room by any means, but if there's work to be done, I'm willing to do it. And sometimes that's all it takes. In addition to that, I would say just, being very regimented person. I'm sure there's people that are very successful that aren't, but for me, that I found that works for me. I'm a very systems oriented guy, very routine based. So I just try to use everything that I've done my whole life to now be successful in the business world.
Mm-hmm. You're kind of leaning into, I can kind of tell by the way you're talking, Casey. It sounds like you're big on company culture too. And
I am.
what's
I
that mean to
am.
you?
And I mean, I think that's the hardest thing to get. When I was playing ball, especially at the level I was, everybody kind of self-policed. You were with the best of the best. Everybody held each other accountable, to where in the everyday world, that's not always the case. So, and in my industry, the food service industry, that's kind of known to where I can't pay everybody, 100, 200 grand a year. So when you got to kind of be creative to really foster that culture, and that buy-in that you want to have. So, that's where one of my bigger goals for this year is to, continue to build upon that. I've learned that as I've grown to more locations, it's harder and harder to maintain because you have less control, over the day to day. And that's where, I rely on my management team that I continue to build and develop to then hopefully continue to develop their teams at each individual location. I always tell my managers, I said, not only do we need to, constantly raise the bar, we need to raise the floor. We need to bring the floor up so that, let's say our lowest on the totem pole isn't, that job's important. And we need to, instill in that person that, hey, you have a role here. You're very important. We can't succeed without you, and really raise the floor to make sure that we're firing on all cylinders.
I love that. That's such a good line. We talk to a lot of entrepreneurs on here, and I feel like that's one thing we don't. You can read the books and go to the seminars, but you don't hear a lot about when you're in your shoes wearing that hat, how isolating it can be, and as you've
Yeah,
grown something, now you have multiple locations, or if it's somebody who runs a company with, dozens of employees, you're like, well, it was a little bit easier when there were 6 people because I could
absolutely.
communicate, they could hear the passion of my voice on a daily basis. So, I think, would you say middle management is the absolute connecting point between your mission as it changes and
Yeah.
getting the message to the people?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's what I try to pour into my managers,
Mm-hmm.
especially that I've gotten a little bit more seasoned as an operator. When I first opened, I was 25. I shot from the hip. I was very, wild and loose and, chaotic. And I've learned that, they look to me for stability. So, I have to provide that for them. And, my biggest goal, because, my managers are young as well. They're, middle to late 20s, early 30s. And they've never, done this before other than, when they came to me. So I'm always trying to pour into them, to develop them to where they look at it as their business. Many times now that we've grown, they know that specific location better than I know it. And that's what I want. I want them to tell me, hey, get out of the way. You're in my way. I can do this better than you. So that's, my mission is to get them to, essentially be better at what they do than I am.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And absolutely learned that over the years too. All right, Casey, I got to ask you, and you kind of leaned into it just now, but either on this podcast or if I'm just talking to someone on the street, I love hearing stories of the early days because typically we have no idea what we're doing. And
Yeah,
do you look back and it's funny how in just 7 years you do become an expert essentially in your own space, right? Like, what systems work for you and what styles of management you work for you and you want culturally where you want to be. But is it kind of fun and yet maybe a little bit humorous to look back at where you were that first year and not having, did you really just look back and go, I didn't know what I was doing?
yeah, I really did it. It's funny because I just brought a girl back. She worked for me in the early days for about 3 years, and then she ended up leaving to work somewhere else. And then just came on, this past September. She's going to manage one of our Grove City location when it opens. And, her and I were joking around, about how, like, the old days, the good old days of how things ran when we first opened. And she's like, yeah, if it was still like that, I wouldn't be back, so, and I had to do a lot of assuring her in her re-interview process that, we've come a long way as a brand. I've come a long way as an owner, operator, and a leader. And she told me the other day, she's like, yeah, things are awesome now. But yeah, it's funny. I mean, I don't think I would still be doing this if I ran it the way I ran it back in the day. And it's not that we, did anything wrong. It was just, it was very unorganized, very shoot from the hip. No plan of action really beforehand. We kind of just figured it out, and we were wildly successful doing it that way. But I've learned, as you grow, you got to tighten the ship. You got to tighten things up. Otherwise, you can't repeat that.
Sure. Casey, is there a few things you use as far as tools in the tool belt to help your growth? Are you're a reader? Do you like seminars? Are you a podcast guy? Like in today's world, I feel like there's so many free resources. Or you just dive in, I learn by experience and chalk that up as I go?
Yeah. I mean, I read a little bit, probably not as much as I should. It's probably, like I was saying at the beginning, is just, diving into my routine. I love going to the gym. That sets my morning. It sets my day, and it kind of gets me, in the zone, and it gets me able to, think clearly and operate throughout the day. I think I rely on that more than anything, and then just, my experience. I mean, from the start, I was just a regular everyday employee in my business. I worked all the positions. I had to, and so, I mean, I rely on many, many, many years doing that to where, I'm at the point now to where I've grown. I'm able to, I got a team that are in those positions now. I obviously jump in when I need to. But, I think that I use that and what I've learned over the years to do it better, to do it more efficiently. And I'm always constantly analyzing those things to see, how can we continue to improve upon that.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I wanted to ask you, and I hate going back and to times that were tough for everyone and reliving painful moments, but I find it inspirational to hear when people, especially in the restaurant industry, had to power through and do what it took to succeed through COVID. So,
Yeah.
kind of take me through. I know COVID was a wild time in the restaurant industry because I feel like there was times when it was up because ordering curbside or delivery or, people had to get creative. But then there's also a lot of restaurants that struggle because they relied so much on in-house traffic. So how did that impact Clean Eats and the locations you had at the time? And how did you overcome those?
Yeah. During COVID, we were actually up. We went full curbside with our meal plan services, and that kind of saved us. The fact that we don't rely so much on the actual dine-in foot traffic like so many restaurants do. So, we pivoted. We offered full curbside delivery to where people, would order their meals. We would, hand them to them in their vehicles, and we're able to survive that. Where we really struggled was, post COVID, when all the supply chain issues hit, the cost of goods went through the roof, the cost of labor went through the roof, and right in the middle of that, we expanded to a third location and learned very quickly that we put too many locations too close together.
Mm.
So it was kind of a triple whammy to where we really had to tighten the hatches. And, those 2 years were extremely difficult, 2022 and 2023. But at the same time, I think they made me a 10 times better operator because I actually had to learn how to run the business. Before that, we were wildly successful from the jump. And I was just, kind of like, this is great. We're doing awesome. But I didn't really know what I was doing. So that, really kind of enhanced my ability to run the stores efficiently, learn how to run a business, and taught me a lot. And I think, on the back end, we've come out stronger from it. We repositioned, moved one of our locations to Grandview that just opened. And, since we've done that, our Dublin and New Albany locations have, soared. So that kind of reassured me too, that I wasn't doing something wrong. I always look in the mirror to try to see what I can improve on. And, when we were struggling with that, I was, really doubting myself and thought that, has customer service fallen, has quality fallen? But I didn't really think those things to be true. So I was really, personally validated when we did make the move that, things jumped up almost immediately.
Hmm.
So, as much as those years were a struggle, I'm grateful for them now.
I've always wanted to ask someone who's launching and expanding with franchises because it just amazes me. You can look down and have four or five, or but I got to think it's kind of like a family. You have older children, then you have the younger ones being born. So is that a constant challenge you have? You look back at the stores that are more seasoned. Can you can you breathe a little easier, especially with a good manager in place, knowing, okay, I've got Grandview opening. I got to spend all my attention on the newborn. How is that? Is it just a constant shifting back and forth, or do you eventually kind of see them all as the same?
No, they are. They are different, and I think that comes back to, our teams and developing teams. I always try to promote from within. Any chance that I get, I'm trying to move somebody up the ranks. It doesn't always work that way, but so far for me, I only have one manager that I've gone outside to get. Everybody else has been promoted from an hourly position that they started with, whether they were in college or just out of college. So, that I think alleviates a lot of stress on me because I know they know all the positions because they work those positions. And then I find, I take pride in giving them that opportunity, to continue to grow from within the company. That's probably one of my favorite things about what I do is, elevating someone to be the general manager, or giving somebody a promotion. I take a lot of pride in that. And the day that I get to go in the store and give somebody a raise, I'm pretty fired up. I'm probably more excited than they are to get it. Um, and a couple of years ago, I made the decision. The management team that I have in place now, they've been with me for a long time, and I really wanted to invest in them. So I made all of them managing partners of their location. So they have a direct tie to some equity in the business, based on obviously certain performance metrics. But I want to reward them for their hard work. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't be able to have four locations if it wasn't for them. So I think they should be able to reap some benefits of that, and obviously they put the work in to deserve it.
No, that's a beautiful strategy, and like you said, it all ties back into culture and bringing people at the forefront and raising up. So, what's that future with that look like, Casey? Are you allowed to say? Do you have other locations in mind, or do you have the Central Ohio platform if you choose to keep expanding?
Yeah, yeah, and that's always been my plan. I want to reach as many people as we can in Central Ohio to obviously give them the product that we have. So I mean, our slogan at Clean Eats is "We change lives," and that's our mission, and we want to give every person possible the access they have, or the access to us. So my goal was always 8 to 10 locations in Central Ohio.
Okay.
We'll be at 4 next month. I promised myself I would take a breather for at least a few months, to relax. But I would love to go, west out to Marysville. I'd love to do Delaware, Lewis Center area. I'd love to do Pickerington Canal. And then, as Columbus continues to grow, maybe we can push out east to, Newark or Granville. I think that would put us at around 8 locations.
Okay. Okay. And Casey, what do you do to stay motivated? Because this can be just so taxing. I mean, we're talking about all the success, and I know it's so fun, it's so fun to talk about, look about, in just a short period of time. But gosh, I know there's just times when you just you feel like you're getting your teeth kicked in some days, and some days that last for weeks. And well, in perfect example, like you said, when you saturated your own market there for that 2 year snapshot. Like, what did you do then, and what do you do now to stay motivated? I know you like to go to the gym, but is there something else that you can kind of just lean into a little bit to get some inspiration when needed?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm a very simple guy, but in terms of like, I would say in a way that I'm materialistic. I set targets for myself. Like, my dream is to build my own, custom house, or I want the nice sports car, I want the nice truck, and you know, I'm very easy to please, and I don't need much. But having those goals, kind of gets me out of bed some days that I may not want to get out of bed. Um, and I don't think that's bad to have goals and wants like that. They can be a motivator or a driver for you, and it works for me. also, I think it comes back from, my playing days of just, wanting to be the best and, be the best at what you do. And with that comes, growth and helps me, compete on a day-to-day basis. So I think it's a combination of both of those things. And then, as I've gotten older and our teams have expanded, I realize that I'm, responsible for a lot of people. And, I got one of my managers, Shay. She's pregnant. She's expecting in a couple months. That adds a layer of weight to me. Because I'm responsible in a way for feeding that family, and I take that personal. I don't take it lightly, and I want to provide not only for myself, but give my team a really good life as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so good. And again, you just keep tying it back to culture. And I just love this mindset with you, is people first, and that's where it's clear to see your success is going to lie in the future. Casey, you mentioned earlier about just being fortunate coming out of a pro baseball career and kind of having this opportunity and this clear vision of what you wanted to do next. We talked about pro athletes that don't, but what advice would you give to maybe not necessarily just pro athletes, but someone who's coming out of a career, and they're young or maybe in their middle age, and they're like, gosh, I'm not quite sure how to transition, right? Because you completely, even though you knew at some point, no matter how far this goes, being a professional athlete is going to have an expiration date, and you're still going to be fairly young, no matter how far it goes. Unless you're LeBron, seems like he's going to play till he's 60, but
Doesn't age.
Tom Brady, yeah. So, is there advice you would give to people like that as maybe I got another year or two, I'm going to start to lean into something else. Like, is there anything that you would offer as a suggestion or advice for people like that?
Yeah, I would just tell people don't wait for the perfect time,
Mm.
because there is no perfect time. And I tell people, if you keep saying, oh, I'm not ready yet, or oh, it's not ready yet, my idea is not ready yet, well then it's never going to be ready. Sometimes you just gotta jump out there and go for it. And I'm not telling people to make a brash decision. Obviously, you need to have a plan in place. You need to have a plan of action, but it's the same thing, that kind of the analogy when you brought up the reading a little bit ago. I don't necessarily think reading is bad, but you can read all of the motivational books in the world, but if you don't take any action, what good are they doing? So I would tell people, just sometimes you got to take that leap of faith and work until it works out.
Mm. Yeah, so true. Yeah, I'm a routine junkie like you are, and there's sometimes I get so caught up in having to do that morning routine, which for me does include reading or going to the gym or doing those things. And if you miss a day, it's like you beat yourself up. You're like, well, now I'm a failure. I'm like, no, man.
I've,
If you just show up today, you're still going to be okay. You still
I haven't been to the gym. You probably noticed I haven't been to the gym in a week, and it's killing me.
have.
But I'll get back in there. I mean, I think last Tuesday I went, and by no means had a good workout, but I was there for 45 minutes or so just to move around and feel something. So I hear you there.
Well, I noticed Friday. I didn't expect to see it. I noticed this morning, but I was like, if anybody gets a hall pass, you're launching this new store and you're working your butt off. So, but
I'll be back. I've already my gym partner is already on me, so I'll be back tomorrow
sure
morning.
he is. That's amazing. No, that's so true, and I think it's such good advice. Is it's good to have routines, and it's good to have, especially moving the body, right, to get focused and recentered for the day, but not beating ourselves up like, hey, I didn't read today, or I didn't do yoga today, or I didn't go to the gym today, or I didn't meditate today, but I can still show up when I have this meeting, or when it comes to sitting down with my manager to figure out how we're gonna tackle this problem we have. And I think it's at times it's how we can turn the story in our brain of like the day's not over, right? We still
Yeah.
have time to make good with
Well,
it.
the same can be related to people with dieting. Like a lot of times, they'll let's say they have a bad meal and my whole day's ruined. Well, the day's ruined if you let it keep going, and you turn your one bad meal into four bad meals. One bad meal is not going to kill you. It's not going to kill your progress. It's always getting back in your routine, get back in the zone, and taking a step forward.
Isn't that weird, kind of interesting? If someone's never been to the gym before, it's like if you go once, you're not going to see a result. And it's the
Yeah.
same thing. If you're going every day and you miss, you're not going to see that result for missing. So it's kind of weird how you know,
Yeah, I think I was reading a study that said you have up to 14 days before you would see any like muscular atrophy.
Wow.
So, you're not in there for a few days. You looking in the mirror, you feel small.
Yeah.
When you got more time than that, your body will bounce back.
You got plenty of time. You tell your workout buddy, you still got another week. You can kind of
I
hang,
know. I got another week.
and you're not going to be eating unhealthy. I mean, you're surrounded by
That's true.
where you eat. So, uh, Casey, I have two final questions for you here. If I let you go, my first one is, if you've gone through this experience and you can kind of blend, uh, you know, pro baseball leading into this entrepreneurial, just cool and amazing journey that you're on. What's one thing you've learned about yourself as you've gone down this path?
I mean, I would probably say that I'm more creative than I give myself credit for. I I view myself as a very black and white person. Very yes no, very straight and narrow. This is how things are done. But I will say, especially the last couple of years too, when times have been tougher, I've had to get more creative. And I've always said, I'm just not good at that. But I think it's just because I never tried. And so that would say one thing that I've learned is that I may have a little bit more creativity than I lead myself to believe.
Yeah, I feel like you kind of get forced into that, right? There's times with being an entrepreneur and you just get forced into, well, how am I going to make this work? And you probably know that firsthand, like you talked about, when you go through that 2 year snapshot of like, I got to figure out some new ways of thinking. And it's kind of cool how you dig deep and go, I didn't know I had that thread in there. It's kind of neat to see
Yeah,
that creativity. So.
yeah. Because like I said, I tell myself I'm very boring, but I don't know. People sometimes say I'm not, and I'm like, all right, maybe I'm not so boring.
Yeah, boring can be good, right? You stick to the
Yeah.
basics and you consistent and look what happens. So love it. Casey, last question before I let you go. What advice would you give to someone who hears the whisper of a dream that it just seems too crazy to chase?
I mean, I don't know who said it, but someone said if people aren't laughing at your dreams, they're not big enough.
Mm,
And I think that that's true in a lot of ways. I also almost have this like unrealistic expectation of where I want to get, and maybe it is unrealistic, maybe it's not, but if you don't set that bar there, you're not going to come close to it. So I just dare people to dream, and I think you should dream big, and just take a jump. If you don't do it, you never know. So I think I could die knowing that I took a chance rather than saying what if. And my dad said that a lot to me with my baseball career growing up. He's like, I don't know how far you can get, but you don't want to have any regrets. So give it your all, go as far as you can, play as long as you can play, and then at the end of the day, you gave it all you had.
oh, it's so good. Thank you. For the listeners out there, it's Casey Schroeder, Clean Eats, 4 locations coming soon, the fourth location in Central Ohio. If you're here, go check it out, get your meals for the week, or just go check out the cafe. And if you're passing through Central Ohio, check in and find out where the nearest location is to you, and support this awesome entrepreneur and just amazing food that they have there. I was in there last week, and it's absolutely delicious. And I'm going to start getting on the meal plan myself. So,
I
Casey, thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Yeah, of course, Casey, thank you for being here with me today.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me.